always thought I understood love. I had grown up reading books, watching movies, and listening to stories about the kind of love that makes your heart race, that fills the empty spaces and makes everything feel right. But nothing could have prepared me for what I experienced with Alex. It all started so beautifully. I was 27 when I met him. We met at a mutual friend's party, and I still remember the moment he walked into the room tall, confident, with a smile that could light up the darkest corner of a room. He had a way of talking that made you feel like the most important person in the world. And somehow it felt like fate. Like we were meant to meet. The first few months with Alex were a whirlwind. Our dates were magical. Quiet dinners, long walks in the park, spontaneous weekend getaways. We talked about everything. Our dreams, our fears, our childhoods. We shared our secrets, our hopes for the future. For me, it felt like I had found someone who understood me in a way no one else had. "I feel like I've known you forever," he said one night, his hand resting gently on mine. And I believed him. I believed every word. I was falling for him, and I had never been so sure of anything in my life. I thought I knew what love was, but with Alex, it was different. I felt special, valued, like everything in my life had led me to this moment. The love we shared was intoxicating, but slowly, without warning, things began to shift. It started small. Little comments, little criticisms that felt like nothing at first but started to add up. He'd mention how I looked. "You don't need to wear so much makeup." Or, "I like it better when you wear your hair down." At first, I thought it was just him being protective, maybe even affectionate in his own way. But slowly, it began to feel like control. And then there were the arguments. Nothing major at first. Just disagreements about where we were going for dinner or how we spent our weekends. But every time Alex would turn things around, make me feel like I was the one at fault. He would get quiet and cold, and I'd try to fix things, always apologizing even when I wasn't sure what I'd done wrong. It was hard to pinpoint when it all started, but one evening during a dinner with friends, it became glaringly obvious. We had been talking, laughing, when I made a passing comment about my ex. It wasn't anything significant, just something I was sharing about a memory. Alex's face darkened. "I don't want to hear about your past," he snapped, his voice sharp. I froze. "What do you mean?" "I don't need to hear about your exes," he said again, his voice rising. "It's disrespectful." I felt a knot form in my stomach. I tried to apologize, but the damage was done. He didn't listen. He stormed out of the restaurant, leaving me sitting there feeling humiliated. I wasn't sure how it had escalated so quickly, but I found myself questioning everything. What had I done? What was wrong with me? When I texted him later that night to apologize again, he didn't respond. But the next day, he acted like nothing had happened. He kissed me on the forehead, told me he loved me, and everything seemed to go back to normal. At least, that's what I told myself. But everything wasn't normal. It was never normal again after that night. The cracks started getting wider, more obvious. Alex began disappearing for hours at a time, texting late at night, leaving his phone face down whenever he was around me. He worked late often, always too busy for me, but I convinced myself it was just stress. He had a demanding job after all. Then came the night I'll never forget. I hadn't meant to show up unannounced. I was just passing by his apartment, and something in my gut told me I should stop by. When I got there, the door was slightly ajar. I knocked, but when I heard no answer, something made me push it open. And that's when I saw them. Alex was on the couch, his arm wrapped around another woman. She was laughing at something on his phone, her body pressed up against his in a way that made me freeze in place. My heart stopped. I couldn't breathe. "Alex?" I whispered, the words barely escaping my mouth. He looked up, and for a moment his face went pale. He scrambled to get up, pushing the woman away. She stood up quickly, her eyes shifting between the two of us. "Mia, wait, this isn't what you think," Alex stammered, his face full of panic. I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. "What is this?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "Who is she?" "She's just a friend," he said quickly, his voice defensive. "It's nothing, Mia, I swear." But I didn't believe him. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the way he tried to make it seem like I was overreacting, like I was the crazy one for being upset. He didn't seem sorry. He wasn't even ashamed. "I can't believe you," I said, barely able to form the words. My chest hurt and tears were welling up in my eyes, but I couldn't let them fall. "Not yet. I thought you loved me." "I do love you," Alex said, reaching for me, but I pulled away. "This was a mistake. It won't happen again. Please, Mia, come on." But the damage was done. I left that night, my heart breaking in ways I didn't know were possible. The next few days were a blur. Alex begged me to come back. He promised he'd end things with the other woman, that it was a one-time mistake. He told me he loved me, that I was the only one who mattered. And for a while, I believed him. I wanted to believe him. I wanted everything to go back to how it was. But it didn't. Things got worse. The emotional abuse that followed was like a slow, suffocating poison. It started with the gaslighting. Alex would twist my words, make me feel like I was crazy, like I was imagining things. Every time I questioned him about something, he would turn it around, making me feel guilty for doubting him. "I do everything for you, Mia," he'd shout. "And this is how you repay me? You don't trust me?" He started to control what I wore, where I went, even who I talked to. When I would try to push back, to stand up for myself, he would get angry, furious. The first time he raised his voice at me, I was stunned. "You don't know how good you have it," he would say. "I don't deserve this from you. You're ungrateful." I started to feel like I was losing my grip on reality. I wasn't sure what was real anymore. The emotional manipulation, the constant belittling, the threats, it all blurred into one long, painful cycle. One night, I found myself sitting in the bathroom, tears streaming down my face. My mind was foggy, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking as I stared at my reflection in the mirror, and for the first time, I realized something. I had lost myself. I was no longer the confident, independent woman I used to be. I was broken. That's when I knew. I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't keep pretending that things would magically get better. I had to leave. It wasn't easy. It took time. But I packed my things and left his apartment, leaving behind not just Alex, but the woman I had become in the relationship. I knew it would hurt. I knew I'd have moments of doubt. But I also knew that I couldn't stay in something that was slowly destroying me. The road to healing was long, harder than I ever imagined. There were days when I wanted to call him, when I missed the comfort of his voice, the way he used to hold me. But those moments were fleeting. I learned to focus on myself, on rediscovering who I was before Alex had come into my life. I went to therapy. I leaned on my friends. I started doing things I had forgotten I loved. Reading, hiking, painting. Slowly, I began to heal. Slowly, I began to rebuild. I would never be the same after everything I'd gone through, but I would be stronger. I learned that love wasn't supposed to hurt, not the way Alex had made it. I learned that I deserved better, and that I could love myself without needing someone else to complete me.